Senegal was a city where life was slow but peaceful, where people would close their shops as evening fell and find life's pleasures in cups of tea at home, where children played in the streets and elders sat in mosque courtyards telling stories. But that night, everything changed. When the clock struck exactly 11:30 p.m. and the entire city had surrendered to deep sleep, the ear-piercing sound of motorcycles echoed from afar. First one, then two. Then it seemed as if the sky itself had cracked open. Those streets that had always remained silent suddenly trembled with thunderous sounds. About 50 motorcycles wrapped in black smoke broke through Senegal's main gate and entered. The men riding them wore black clothes. They had gleaming helmets on their heads without any names or numbers. Their arrival cast a shadow of fear over the streets. Each rider carried modern automatic rifles in their hands, with ammunition belts hanging from their shoulders. Their motorcycles moved so fast that only the poisonous sound of engines remained in the air. They went to every street, every corner, every intersection, every mosque, stopped in front of every shop, and wrote with black chalk, "This area is now under our control." Soon doors began to rattle, but no one came out due to fear. Trembling shadows could be seen behind windows, eyes peering from behind curtains in frightened souls. Among these, a small child hiding behind a curtain said to his mother, "Mother, who are these people?" The mother placed her hand over his mouth and began reciting the kalima in her heart. A vegetable vendor who worked hard all day to barely earn 2 meals was hiding inside his shop watching the scene. He watched as the boards he had worked so hard to arrange were being broken, ice boxes were being overturned, and spray painted on the wall, "Whoever goes against us will not remain alive." He wanted to say something. He wanted to scream, but his tongue wouldn't cooperate. An elderly Haji Abdul Rashid was watching everything from his rooftop. He held prayer beads in his hands, tears in his eyes. He knew these weren't just thugs. This was the arrival of a great storm. With the rumbling of motorcycles, the city's electricity also went out for a while. Every pole they touched while passing sparked and darkness fell. God knows what kind of modern tools they had. For a moment, it seemed as if Senegal was being buried alive. With all the sobbing breaths, by the last hours of the night, this gang had gathered at the city's central square. Among them stood an extraordinary shadow, extremely tall, wearing a black jacket, holding a black stick in his hand. It seemed as if he was the very sign of death himself. This was Muna, the leader of this entire caravan. He struck his stick on the ground and said in a loud voice just one sentence, "We have arrived, and now we have no intention of leaving." Then they all mounted their motorcycles and headed towards Senaga's central field. They made that field their headquarters. The city was now completely in their grip. But they didn't know that in Senaga's darkness, where every person had closed their eyes in fear, somewhere one eye was still open, one heart was still beating, one name was still alive, and that name was Ibrahim Tarore. The story had just begun, and the night's poison had not yet fully spread. Ibrahim was heading towards Senegal. The car's windows were covered with dust, as if the dust of the road was also warning him to turn back. This was no longer the Senegal you had left behind. On the road, there was a lamp post every 10 steps. Some were broken, and bats were hanging from the rest. There was a strange silence in the air, the kind of silence that only occurs when people's tongues are forcibly silenced. As soon as the jeep tried to enter the city's main gate, a black motorcycle came and stopped in front of it. A thug, hidden in a helmet on the motorcycle, growled while hitting the jeep's light, "This area is closed. Go back." Ibrahim said nothing. He just looked into his eyes once, and the next moment opened the jeep's door and stepped down. Silence fell on the road again. The thug's breathing became heavy. He couldn't understand how a lone person was standing in front of him so fearlessly without any weapon or security. Ibrahim said just one sentence. "Go show your thuggery somewhere else. Cowards don't live here." The thug stood for a few moments, then, as if thinking something, he stepped back, started his motorcycle, and disappeared into the darkness. Now Ibrahim's jeep slowly began moving towards the city. But there was desolation everywhere. Every house window was closed. On every door was written in black chalk, "This area is now under Muna's control." Ibrahim watched every corner, every wall in amazement. Then, at the corner of a street, he saw an old vegetable vendor sitting with his cart. His face showed exhaustion, dust in his beard, and sorrow in his eyes. As soon as he saw Ibrahim, his eyes filled with tears. With difficulty he got up and said in a trembling voice, "Ibrahim, we are finished, son. They have destroyed everything. They are very big beasts." Ibrahim placed his hand on his shoulder, listened to his entire story, then, after remaining silent for a while, slowly said, "They are only beasts as long as you fear them. Stop being afraid, and they will stop frightening you." The old man lowered his eyes. He had understood that hope had awakened in the city. After comforting him, Ibrahim moved forward. Walking through street after street, he could only hear the silence of defeat. When he passed by the school, he saw the door was locked and spray-painted on the walls, "Success comes through obedience." When he reached near the hospital, he was shocked. There were no patients inside. Only the thugs' motorcycles were parked there. He was still standing there thinking when a little girl came running from the front street. A masked thug was chasing her. Ibrahim immediately opened the jeep door and pulled the girl inside. The girl, trembling while looking at Ibrahim, said, "Uncle, they took my father. He was sick. Father didn't say anything to them, but still they took him away." Hearing the girl's words, the light of anger flashed in Ibrahim's eyes for the first time. He looked ahead. The thug was about to pull out his gun, but one look from Ibrahim silenced him. He recognized in the first glance that Ibrahim Tarore was standing in front of him. He put the gun back in his pocket and ran away. After assuring the girl of her father's return, he dropped her at her house. Then, in the last hours of the night, Ibrahim parked his jeep in front of the mosque and began waiting for the call to prayer. But time passed, and the sound of azan did not echo in the air. The entire synagogue seemed to have forgotten even how to breathe. Streets were empty, lamps were extinguished, and the darkness of fear had settled in hearts. Ibrahim Tarore sat alone at the mosque door. Dust was flying, and the sky was lightless. This was the same door where the dawn azan used to echo. Now it was drowned in silence. Ibrahim waited for a while. Then he got up and opened the door with his own hands. The sound of iron scraping echoed in the air. When he went inside, he saw the prayer rows were closed and the loudspeaker wires were cut, as if someone had deliberately silenced the azan. Slowly he moved forward and reached Hafiz Salim, who was sitting in the corner of the mosque, with trembling legs and lowered eyes, leaning against the ground. His face showed such fear as if he hadn't slept for many nights, as if giving the azan had also become a crime. Ibrahim asked in a deep but peaceful voice, "Why haven't you given the azan yet, Maulvi Sahib?" Hafiz Salim raised his eyes. There was only fear and helplessness in them, but when he saw Ibrahim Tarore, rays of hope lit up on his face. Gathering courage, he said, "They say not to give the azan. They were saying that if Allah's name echoes from the loudspeaker and people gather, they will blow up the mosque too. I'm just trying to save the mosque, Ibrahim Sahib. Ibrahim listened to this silently for a few moments. Then he stood up, climbed the mosque steps, and began connecting the loudspeaker wires. In a few moments, when the wires were connected, he raised his face towards the sky and began giving the azan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. This first phrase spread through the air like lightning. In every street, behind every closed door, in every trembling heart, something began to stir. Some thought it was a dream, but many people knew, this was Ibrahim Tarore's voice. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Then slowly, someone opened a door slightly, as if wanting to confirm that this voice was really coming from the mosque, because everyone had heard that announcement on the loudspeaker at night that if the azan was given and people gathered, no one would remain alive. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Then another door opened. A young boy climbed onto the roof to look, and his eyes filled with tears. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala al-falah. Then it was as if the entire heart of Sinaga began beating together. Women picked up their children and quietly came to the courtyard. Men silently began performing ablution. Some young men came out of their homes with prayer mats. Some still showed hesitation and began peering from door corners. But somewhere in the corner of their hearts, seeing people go on Allah's path, courage awakened, and they too performed ablution and came out. Then someone in the quiet street said, "He has returned. Has Ibrahim Tarore come back?" Another immediately said, "Then now we will definitely be saved." But not every face was confident. Some still had lines of fear on them. At that time, some young men said to each other, "If the thugs find out that people are gathering in the mosque, they will open fire." Hearing them, a man replied, "If Ibrahim Tarore is standing in the mosque, then we too will stand there." Outside the mosque, within just a few moments, dozens of people had gathered, some holding prayer beads in trembling hands, some silently watching Ibrahim. Ibrahim gave no speech, made no announcement. He just waited for dawn and began preparing for prayer. And when it was time for congregation, he stood in prayer with everyone. As the first light of morning crept across Sinaga's silent walls, the fear of thugs was disappearing from people's hearts. The mosque courtyard was half lit, but a new glow had descended on the faces standing inside. Ibrahim's azan had shaken the entire city. People were still frightened, but they had awakened. This was the moment when hearts were trembling with fear, but the strength of faith had supported them. When the prayer ended, silence fell for a few moments. Then Ibrahim stepped forward. Standing near the mosque's mihrab, he looked at the people. Then, as if a voice emerged from a wounded heart, he spoke softly. "I was very sad to learn that life has become more important to people than religion. I know you are frightened. Threats were written on your doors. Those thugs made your children's schools their headquarters, and you bore everything silently. But today you are here. Why? Because the light of faith still remains in your hearts." People continued nodding silently. Some had tears in their eyes. Whether old or young, everyone was listening to what was erasing the fear and despair inside them. Now Ibrahim's voice had determination and firmness. Whether they are 50 or 100, on motorcycles or on foot, with guns or empty-handed, they cannot dominate us until we surrender ourselves to them, until we consider ourselves weak. A young man who had just finished praying said in a trembling voice, "But sir, they shower us with bullets." Ibrahim looked at him seriously. He was sitting on the mosque floor with fear in his eyes and questions on his lips. Ibrahim bent down, placed his hand on his shoulder and said, "Silence never provides protection. Silence only gives slavery. If we don't speak today, tomorrow your children will also learn only silence and slavery." These words had just echoed off the walls when suddenly the sound of rumbling came from a distance outside the mosque door. First one, then two, then it kept increasing. The same thugs on motorcycles emitting black smoke came and stopped in front of the mosque. Hearing the sound, people's faces turned pale. Some averted their eyes.
Some began reciting prayers with trembling lips. An elderly worshipper held prayer beads with trembling hands and began reading La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Ibrahim immediately raised his hand, signaling everyone to remain quiet. Then, without any haste, without any hesitation, he moved towards the mosque door. Outside the door was a terrifying scene. 25 thugs on motorcycles, whose eyes peering from inside helmets looked like lifeless, soulless shadows. Everyone had modern guns in their hands, cartridges on their shoulders, and bulletproof jackets on their bodies. Standing among them was Farouk, the local leader of these thugs. The burned mark of a dragon snake on his wrist had become a symbol of terror. Farouk let out a loud laugh as if mocking the silence. "So, a revolution rehearsal is happening here. You people have turned the mosque into a movement's headquarters." Ibrahim remained standing on the steps. There was neither fear nor anger on his face, just that peaceful seriousness that only hearts connected to Allah possessed. He looked up at the sky, then raised his eyes to the mosque roof and said, "Come then, let's test your faith once more." The next moment, bang, 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 Farouk fired 3 shots in the air, and it seemed as if the air was tearing the sky and calling death to earth. Screams echoed inside the mosque. Some people lay down on the ground. Some began hiding. The elderly prayed. Men began reciting the kalima. Fear spread all around as if all hope had been wrapped in mist in a moment. But Ibrahim Tarore remained standing in his place. On the steps, with his full height and weight, he looked at the sky for a moment, then looked into Farouk's eyes. He said nothing, but conveyed much. The smoke was still in the air. Fear had knocked on the mosque door, but people still had the strength of faith. Ibrahim took 2 steps down the stairs, then stopped there and said in the same peaceful voice, "If you think you can frighten us with these guns, that is your great misunderstanding. But if you still have doubt, then try it." Hearing this, Farouk's gun barrel was pointed at Ibrahim's chest, but his grip was getting weaker every moment. "I'm not afraid, Ibrahim Tarore," Farouk growled, as if trying to overcome his own fear. Ibrahim said with a slight smile, "Then why these warning shots? Why didn't you fire directly at the chest?" Farouk's eyebrows tensed, but he remained silent. The thugs standing behind him also began looking at each other, as if something was stirring inside them too. Ibrahim took another step forward. Now he was standing directly in front, within gun range. "You learned to shoot, but never felt the weight of faith. We all know who you are, Farouk. You are a Muslim. You have read the Quran. And I know you didn't come to destroy the mosque. You just came to spread fear." For a moment, Farouk's face moved, as if some buried secret was now desperately trying to come out. "I can do anything to accomplish my purpose, Ibrahim. Don't challenge me." But now his voice didn't have the same poison as before. Perhaps he was also afraid. Ibrahim looked at the sky, then paused and said, "If it's not God's will, even a leaf doesn't move. Farouk, a gun is just a tool. The decision comes from above. If you had been given permission today, I wouldn't be alive." Now a strange silence fell in the air. Farouk's hand, which had been on the gun barrel until now, slowly began coming down. Soon some young men standing in the line of thugs took off their helmets. The same indifference was still on their faces, but now there were deep questions in their eyes. At this moment, a young boy standing with Farouk shouted, "You're right, Ibrahim Tarore. We also don't want the mosque's destruction. We just want people to obey us, to live in fear of us." Farouk turned and looked at him angrily, but said nothing. Ibrahim, now stepping towards Farouk, said, "Perhaps your conscience is still alive. Farouk, bow before the one who created you. Don't commit injustice and put down the gun." Farouk's eyes wouldn't move away from Ibrahim's eyes. The gun was now completely down, but his face was broken from inside, as if a war was happening not outside his body, but inside. Then suddenly, Farouk signaled the thugs. Everyone started their motorcycles. They began retreating, but Farouk still stood there. Ibrahim's voice was coming out haltingly, as if someone had placed a hand on his throat. "What you're doing could have dangerous consequences."
Ibrahim's voice was steady, almost like a whisper carved in stone. The one who stands with truth cannot be defeated by fear or danger. Farouk lowered his gaze to the gun in his hand. For a long second, silence pressed around him. Then, without a word, he slung it aside, mounted his motorcycle, and vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of black smoke that curled like a curse in the air. At the mosque's entrance, Ibrahim Tarore still stood, but this time he was not alone. The worshippers who had hidden in fear were stepping out one by one. Their hearts, moments ago shrouded in despair, now flickered with fragile hope. The growl of motorcycle engines had faded into the distance, yet their smoke lingered, dark shadows staining the mosque's steps. Ibrahim did not move. His eyes searched the horizon, as if trying to catch the fading echoes of danger. The worshippers gathered behind him, faces pale with the memory of death. But where fear had been, now questions burned. A young man finally broke the silence. "Ibrahim, sir, who were they? So organized, so merciless, like executioners." Ibrahim turned slowly, his gaze heavy. "That," he said, "is what I must find out. Were they just thugs or pawns in a much larger game?" He cast one last look at the mosque, then stepped into the night alone, walking not toward safety, but toward truth. The road led to Sanaga, a place where silence had long been bought with fear. No matter what storms passed, the people there never spoke. Fear had locked their tongues, and helplessness had swallowed their courage. Ibrahim's first destination was the Yaqub Library, an unofficial hub for whispered intelligence. Inside, among rows of forgotten books, sat Qadir Ustad, an old man who had been collecting files for decades. His memory was sharper than any archive. When Ibrahim finished recounting everything, Qadir Ustad silently opened a drawer coated in dust. From within, he pulled out a worn file, edges frayed with age. His voice was low but heavy. "This is not new thuggery, my son. This is an old wound." Ibrahim frowned, watching as the old man unfolded yellowed papers. Inside lay photographs, field notes, and fragments of reports, records written in plain, unpolished words, but soaked in blood and history. Qadir Ustad continued, "The men you saw on motorcycles, half of them were children once. At 12, weapons were forced into their hands. Their parents, either slaughtered or lost in the chaos of war." He paused, his eyes shadowed. "Later, they fell into the jaws of an international smuggling ring. Now they claw for a place in this world by seizing Sanaga, piece by piece. Something ignited in Ibrahim's eyes, a flame that burned with anger and resolve. Kadir Ustad leaned closer, his tone grave. They are no longer just boys. They are 50-man motorcycle squads, bound by greed and led by one name: Muna. The file slipped in Ibrahim's grip. His heart stopped for a moment. Muna. The same Muna who 10 years ago commanded terror groups? The same Muna who shoved rifles into children's hands, who hid behind them as human shields? Kadir Ustad's face was grim as he nodded. Yes, the same Muna. Today, he is not just a warlord. He is a kingpin in an international empire of drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. He pays these young thugs 10,000 a day, and in return, they control the cities for him. Ibrahim's jaw tightened, his fist closing around the brittle file. The past had returned, not as a ghost, but as a wildfire. Ibrahim drew in a long breath and let silence linger before speaking. This is not just a war of weapons. It is a war of conscience, of livelihoods, and of old wounds. His path was now clear. That evening, he walked toward the abandoned police station at the edge of the city. The force had no power there anymore, but deep inside its walls, in the forgotten record room, lay the ghosts of the past. Dust and darkness swallowed him as he stepped inside. The hinges groaned when he opened a rusted cupboard. His eyes fell on a worn file stamped with bold letters: Operation Sardara. Leader, Muna Khan. He sat against the cold wall, file in hand, as clouds gathered overhead. The report revealed the truth. Muna's real name was Abdul Manan Khan, a Pathan boy who had joined a notorious terror group at 16. He became infamous after a brutal attack on a United Nations convoy. Then he vanished from the world's eyes, only to return years later, disguised in power. Ibrahim read in silence, the words pressing like lead on his heart. At last he whispered to the night, "Most of these boys are not criminals. They are just lost." But then lightning flickered in his eyes. Yet the one who led them astray, he deserves punishment. Muna, I am coming for you. When Ibrahim stepped out of the station's broken doorway, the first raindrop struck the earth. In his hand, he carried the file that held Muna's truth. His steps moved toward streets shadowed by death. Sanaga was no longer a city, it was a battlefield. But this war would not be won with guns alone. It was a war of character, wisdom, and faith. Ibrahim knew the only way to break the enemy was from within, and so he began to walk among them. Night after night, Ibrahim disguised himself, sometimes as a cart vendor, sometimes a beggar, sometimes a mud-stained laborer. The same alleys and intersections patrolled by Muna's motorcycle squads became his hunting ground. He observed quietly. He saw boys snatching phones, threatening strangers, laughing under the veil of darkness. But behind their bravado, Ibrahim noticed something else. Their eyes carried exhaustion, emptiness, and questions they themselves didn't dare to ask. One night, he found 3 young men behind an abandoned store, smoking hashish. Their motorcycles leaned nearby, and the haze of drugs clouded their careless laughter. Ibrahim approached calmly and said, in a voice both gentle and firm, "If money is all you want, I can show you a way to earn it honestly, a way that won't destroy you." The boys stiffened. One instantly pulled out a dagger but froze when his eyes met Ibrahim's steady gaze. The second mocked him with a laugh. "Who are you, old man? Gonna be our father now? Get lost! We know what we're doing." The third said nothing. He only stared at Ibrahim, then lowered his eyes as if an old wound inside him had been touched. Ibrahim's words cut through the silence again. "The day you find the courage to choose honest work, come to me. Don't wait too long. Time does not wait for anyone." He left them standing in silence and disappeared into the dark. The next night, Ibrahim stood near a thieves' market. A motorcycle thief named Riaz was passing by, a man who stole in daylight and served Muna's gang at night. Ibrahim stopped him near an old naan shop. His question was sharp, sudden. "Is your mother still alive?" Riaz froze, startled. "Who are you?" he demanded, but his voice trembled. Ibrahim did not answer directly. "I hear she waits for you every day, praying you'll come back. Her body has no strength left." The bread slipped from Riaz's hand. His lips parted to speak, but before he could, another rider arrived. "Come on, Riaz, Muna brother is waiting." Riaz climbed onto the motorcycle without a word, but as he left, he turned once more to look at Ibrahim. His eyes carried something that hadn't been there before. Ibrahim understood. These young men were not born criminals. They were broken souls, searching for direction. So, every night, he returned, talking, listening, planting seeds of doubt in their loyalty to Muna, awakening the slumbering conscience buried inside them. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the hearts of Muna's men and in the empire he had built. The first crack appeared when 5 motorcycle riders who used to stand threateningly at intersections until yesterday quietly left the city one morning. They took no motorcycles with them, no weapons, just wrapped in old sheets. They went straight to the district police station and recorded their statements. The police officers were amazed. Then, when one of the boys, Fahim, revealed the locations of Muna's weapon caches, fake number plates, and drug dens, the SP's eyes lit up. Ibrahim received this news late at night. He sat leaning against the mosque wall and began praying. But on the other side, Muna was not one to sit quietly. When he heard that 5 boys had exposed him and the police had received maps of his hideouts, he roared so loudly that the walls of his room shook. He immediately mounted his motorcycle and ordered all the boys to gather at an old warehouse. When everyone assembled, the place was dark, with only one bulb burning. Muna had a gun in his hand, and more than 40 boys sitting around him were all silent. On Muna's face was that honey-like expression of a wounded beast ready to strike back. "You have crossed every limit," he roared. "Now you're not just an obstacle, but a danger, and now your punishment is only death." He banged the back of his gun on the table. All the boys were quiet. No one wanted to invite trouble by saying anything. That night there was a halo around the moon, but it had no light. When 50 motorcycle riders with helmets on their heads and guns in their hands set out to bring down Ibrahim Tarore, On the way, one boy asked in a trembling voice, "Muna brother, if Ibrahim doesn't get scared, if he comes to fight back, then—" Muna looked at him, then looking at the sky said, "Then this time we'll make him taste death." Meanwhile, in the mosque courtyard, Ibrahim was performing ablution. Water drops were falling, and on his lips was the remembrance of Allah. There was silence on Senaga's doors and walls, but under that silence a storm seemed to be hiding. The moon had gone behind the clouds. Lamps were lit inside the mosque. Ibrahim Tarore was standing alone, completing the last rak'ah of his tahajjud prayer. There was peace on his face, devotion in his voice, and in his eyes that certainty which only those with complete faith in Allah possess.
When the prayer was complete, he slowly raised his hands. "O my Lord, whatever decision is made today is in your hands. If we are on the right path, keep us steadfast, and if we are astray, guide us. But never let us bow before injustice. Ameen." Then he got up and came out of the mosque smiling. But as soon as he reached the last step, the ground shook with the rumbling of motorcycles. 40 motorcycle riders emitting black smoke had reached in front of the mosque. They had shining guns in their hands, cruelty in their eyes, and bloodthirsty smiles on their lips. Ibrahim stood alone at the mosque door. He had neither a dagger nor a gun. He had only faith. Muna got off his motorcycle, raised his gun, and pointed it at the sky. Then he roared, "This is your last night, Ibrahim. Your existence will become a lesson after today." Then Muna signaled. 40 thugs slowly began moving forward. Now every moment was dangerous. Just a few steps remained between Ibrahim's life and death. But then sirens echoed from all around. Police cars emerged from around the mosque and surrounded the motorcycle riders from all sides. Muna's companions panicked. Someone threw their gun. Someone tried to run. But there was encirclement everywhere. Escape was impossible. Ibrahim had already alerted the police. He knew the enemy would now attack openly. The special police unit in charge told them through the mic to surrender. The color drained from Muna's face. Ibrahim slowly approached Muna and said very gently, "I told you, didn't I? Nothing happens without Allah's will. You brought guns and I was unarmed. But look, today justice has come walking itself." Muna looked at the police all around. Then he sat on his knees on the ground. The gun fell from his hand. His eyes filled with tears, and from his lips came just a trembling whisper, "Forgive me." Behind him, the 50 thug motorcycle riders also began asking for forgiveness. But now there was nothing left for forgiveness. Now only punishment remained. Thus ended the reign of terror in Senegal. Ibrahim Tarore had proven that truth and faith are stronger than any weapon. The city that had been gripped by fear found its voice again, and the mosque's call to prayer once again echoed through its streets, reminding everyone that no darkness can extinguish the light of faith.